Due Process, winner of 25 regional Emmy Awards, including the 2014 New York Emmys for our coverage of criminal justice and current affairs. Due Process is a presentation of Rutgers School of Law, Newark, and the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. Studio facilities provided by the Rutgers ITV Studio, Division of Continuing Studies.
$100 million.
A $100 million gift from Facebook billionaire Mark Zuckerberg, unveiled on Oprah to political fanfare and the promise of great things to come. Now, 5 years later, an important new book explores just what went wrong, as Newark still copes with crisis in its troubled public schools. The grand gesture that failed on this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy. Additional funding from the New Jersey State Bar Foundation and the PSEG Foundation, making things better in our communities.
It made national headlines when Mark Zuckerberg gifted $100 million to Newark schools. The idea was creation of a national model for transforming American education. I'm Raymond Brown.
And I'm Sandra King. Now, 5 years later, the experiment has largely failed, and Newark's still trying to recover from what started like this.
I've committed to starting the Startup Education Foundation, whose first project will be a $100 million challenge grant.
$100 million.
To me, $100 million sounded like all the money in the world. I had never watched Oprah in my life. But I made sure to watch on September 24th, 2010, to see this 26-year-old billionaire pledge $100 million to the Newark schools, and also to hear Cory Booker and Chris Christie talk about using the money to transform education in Newark.
Creating a bold new paradigm for educational excellence in the country to show the way.
And I was absolutely electrified.
So electrified that Dale Russakoff decided to follow that money, to see the transformative process as it unfolded. The result, a book that's brought national attention to a question Newarkers have been asking for years. What happened to the money? And where is the transformation?
Truth has not been a part of what we've been dealing with for 4 years. We've been dealing with spin, distrust, disenfranchisement.
I thought Cory Booker, Zuckerberg, the governor, would at least come up with something that was in the form of a plan for all the schools, as opposed to just a blatant takeover of the district.
A takeover, it's claimed, in which consultants got rich while the children got cheated, in which public schools were passed over for charters with little or no input from those with most at stake.
When somebody comes to you with a proposal, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
This is the first time all three of you have really come together to talk about this big idea.
Mark Zuckerberg did not know, 26 years old, more money than God, and Oprah Winfrey talking to him in one ear and Cory Booker quoting Mahatma Gandhi in the other ear. He didn't know what else, what to do.
Newark is really just because I believe in these guys.
Take the money, take the money.
Mary Bennett, a retired Newark principal, chairs a board charged with transitioning Newark schools back to local control, more than 20 years after takeover by the state. A return fueled by failure to improve the schools, decades of furious pushback, And another former high school principal elected mayor just last year.
We have to be the mayor that keeps our schools open and make sure they're good for all of our students.
His campaign was carried by distrust of the state, the governor, the then superintendent, the previous mayor, anger at their plans for the schools,
We are one! We are one!
and that Zuckerberg money.
There are children who have been harmed. They've been harmed by people who took into no account who they are, who their parents are, and what this community is.
So you spend about $89 million on labor contracts. You spend about 50-something million on some charters. You spend 20 million on consultants.
Spending that's documented in Dale Russakoff's The Prize, Who's in Charge of America's Schools, a book about one local district, but a title with national implications, kind of like the Zuckerberg gift, intended to transform Newark schools into a national model.
Every child deserves a good education, and right now that's not happening.
In Newark, a city he had never visited, the richest millennial on the planet, and he hoped to transform public education on the same scale that he had transformed global communications from his Harvard dorm at age 19.
Except that it didn't turn out that way. Newark schools had far greater problems than college kids looking to connect online, though Cory Booker and Chris Christie added their own agenda.
To expand charter schools and radically restructure district schools, solving the education crisis in all of urban America. As we all know, that did not happen.
We can look back at our academic progress and admit it's been mixed.
Yet even the new Newark superintendent of schools, a major player in the Zuckerberg debacle as Christie's commissioner of education, is acknowledging the hype may just have gone too far.
I suspect that now Senator Booker and Governor Christie said a whole bunch of things in which they overstated their case and just talk about a national model and so on. I'm sure there are words that I'd like to have back.
But the Zuckerberg $100 million and its roughly $80 million match did have a radical effect.
Backward C, that's how you make a dream.
Charter schools have grown to serve almost 40% of Newark children, and more than a third of Newark district schools have been closed, renewed, relocated, phased out, repurposed, redesigned, or taken over by charters.
Charters like Life Academy in the old Burgaw, where I was a student in earlier times, now a part of the KIPP Charter Network with its 183 schools, 8 of them in Newark.
Good afternoon, Princeton University.
The KIPP schools seem to have all the benefits that make Newark parents so anxious for charters.
Life Academy is much better, much cleaner, and I'm so happy to be here.
Even if they subscribe to the widely held Newark belief that charters come at the expense of low-achieving district schools.
What happened was the new definition of public became charter. So that became the school of choice, and people bought it.
We're looking at a system where students left will be subject to the most distressed socioeconomics. They'll have the most challenging family situations and support systems, and there'll be a hell of a lot less money to deal with that.
There are elementary schools this year that will not have an art teacher, will not have a music teacher. The money is gone.
Whatever it takes to be successful.
And then there are the hybrids, like a couple of district schools under the rubric BRIC.
Take your time.
With some of the freedom, flexibility, and extra funding of charters.
The more I learn, the smarter I become.
Created and led by unusually positive, optimistic school leaders.
Yes, why are you late, buddy? I don't want you late for learning. If we can control our feet, we can control our minds. And if we can control our minds, we get to go to college.
Working with the most challenged kids.
And we know that our smartest kids are our kids that work the hardest.
But still part of the district system.
I definitely think that we're being more creative,
than other schools to meet our kids where they're at. Yeah, the passion. Yes, yes, yes.
It's like a family. When you're around them, you feel like you're within your family.
But it's still an open question whether brick will ultimately get swallowed by the charters it so resembles, or continue to point the way to what district schools could be.
Hooray, hooray, hooray. Teachers might blame the parents blame the school blames the state, and our children get squashed in the middle and they fail. And so I think finally, Brick said, enough making excuses, enough pointing the fingers. We want to be a part of the solution.
A solution Newark's still searching for as the charters expand and the district schools still struggle. Meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg's moved on, still focused on education, but influenced perhaps by lessons learned in Newark. He and his wife are starting a school for poor kids in East Palo Alto, with links to comprehensive health care and input this time from community.
But for us, the focus is what happened in Newark and what's next for the city's schools. So we welcome three people you met in Sandy's field piece: Newark school advocate Mary Bennett, the prize author Dale Russakoff, and the man who may have the most at stake in Newark, its mayor, Ras Baraka. Welcome to everybody. I'm sure, Mayor, you would say that the kids have what's most at stake. But in order to achieve the best for them, we focus a little bit on something that happened the night before this taping, a school board meeting where there was disputation and some pretty sharp disagreements. And it seems that there are a number of contending points of view: community folks who favor charters, community folks who are opposed to charter or opposed to the current implementation process. You have union concerns and labor concerns, as well as those who focus primarily on local control. And the question is, are you optimistic about your ability, in light of what happened last night and what's happened for the last several years, to harness these forces in a way that brings you to the objective of a school district where kids in Newark get a quality education?
Yeah, I think that this fight is absolutely necessary, and that ultimately we're going to get something positive out of it. I always say, and I say again and again, that I don't have the luxury to be pessimistic. So at the end of the day, I think that we are going to do what we can to bring forces together.
How do you harness these many forces, all of which have divergent or at least frequently clashing interests?
Well, I do that every day. So ultimately, we have to bring people together. And what is disheartening about the whole thing is I think that parents, there are parents in there that are fighting each other, and in some instances, they're not clear as to what the fight is generally about. I think that there are forces that are acting above what's happening and are paying people and doing all kinds of things and have parents at each other's throat. And even if you think about what happened last night, I don't even think there was anything for the parents to be, there was no resolution, no ordinance, nothing on the table that would make parents argue with one another.
Sandy's probably dying to ask the same question. What are the forces you're referring to that are impacting how parents
there's some corporate forces that are centered around the charter expansion, no matter what. They have no care, which is what I said, that the expansion of the charters in this time is highly irresponsible. They don't care about the condition of the city or the district or the schools. I have to care about all of those kids that will be remaining in those schools. I think they don't care about that, and they're going to do it at all costs. And those forces, and then there are forces who want to protect their traditional position or whatever it is, and they have parents fighting one another about issues that are not at the crux of what the real problem is. I think fundamentally the fact that we don't have the resources, and that the state thinks that they should take resources from one place and give it to another, creates a serious issue in our city where parents just want to learn. I don't think there's a charter parent. I think they're trying to create charter parents with this political thing. I mean, traditional public schools don't have like political organizations, super PACs that organize people to go out and do these specific things. But
the charter parents have been showing up.
Well, and I'm saying that Newark parents have kids in all kinds of schools, right? So I've run across parents that have kids in multiple schools, whether they charter schools or traditional schools. In fact, I've had parents that want to get their kids out of a charter, put them in a traditional, and another kid in their family out of a traditional and put them in a charter. I've had that come to City Hall and ask us to do those kinds of things. But I think that what's happening, because ultimately parents just want kids to go to schools that are good.
Mayor, you were one of the strongest voices against Cammie Anderson, the former superintendent, against the governor, although you and the governor have formed a kind of détente recently, born presumably out of the caring that you talked about. The way to get things done, you get a return to local control. He gets Newark not embarrassing him during his presidential run. Can the détente hold, given all these disparate forces, given your own very strong feelings about how things should be done? Can you actually work with a superintendent who was such a basic part of the system that you despised?
Well, we don't have any choice. So that's like asking the president of the United States, can they work with the president of Iraq or something like that? I mean, we don't have any choice.
But you had to agree to that, did you not?
Agree to what?
Didn't you have to agree to having the superintendent come in, to having the former state
No, I don't
commissioner?
have to. He didn't need me to make any determination about what he wanted to do at all.
Yeah, but would you have gotten a return to local control had you not agreed to that?
I don't think that he would have said Newark needs local control, but I don't think that there was, the good thing about it, there was no agreement, no quid pro quo. You know, I just refused to comment on who he wanted as a superintendent. I refused to get into that discussion, which was, you know, I'm gonna either have this one or that one. In fact, when I left the meeting, we weren't sure who the superintendent was gonna be. I was in my mind sure that he was gonna pick who he wanted to pick as the superintendent.
Why do you think he's agreed to local control?
Well, I think that what you said, he wants to, you know, I think that before he leaves, he wants to say he did something for Newark. And this is his gift on the way out the door, no matter what it looks like or what shape it's in, that he finally turned local control back to Newark, something Democrats couldn't do for 20-something years, that the Republican governor, Christie, did it for Newark, and nobody before that, not Corzine, not McGreevey, not, you know, Whitman, no one did that, but him. And I think that that's what he wants to hang his hat on, you know, at the end of his tenure, that he did that.
Mary Bennett, there's a strange calculus here in which it seems as though the resources will not support the current trajectory of charter schools and quality schools for the remaining kids who are in the district but not in those charter schools. And yet the echo we've been hearing for some time in this state is, going back into the history of special needs district, money's not the issue. We've spent more money in Newark and other urban areas than was needed. What's the calculus here by which you bring all of those kids, regardless of whether in charter schools or traditional district schools, to an education with the current resources, or can it be done without more resources?
Well, at this point, we definitely are experiencing a catastrophic impact of the lack of resources, because we know with charter schools, the money follows the kids. And on top of that, the government of New Jersey gives the charters in Newark anyway additional money. This year they gave them $25 million on top of what they were entitled to by the per pupil.
Is that discretionary money? Could they use that money other ways?
Certainly, they could have given it to us. They could have given it to Newark. We are experiencing a severe deficit. The new superintendent says he had no knowledge when he took the job just how severe the deficit was. But even if he were not the superintendent, the deficit was there, and what we've experienced along with the loss of children is an incredible loss of services. And remember, there's an adequacy funding formula that the state is supposed to use that comes in with the School Funding Reform Act. And students who are special needs, students who are English language learners, students with special situations, the district is supposed to get resources to help that happen, because you're trying to equalize the educational opportunity across the entire state.
But Mary, with charters under control of the state, even if local control is realized in Newark, don't you get stuck with much of the same conundrum that you're dealing with right now? Does local control, how much does local control actually help if you've got 40% or more of the Newark population by the time we get local control in charter schools?
Economically, the local control issue is undeniable. However, having a say in who's your superintendent, how your money's being spent, definitely comes with local control. When the advisory board goes back to being a board of education, they are responsible for the selection of the superintendent. They're responsible for developing the policies and procedures. They have not had that opportunity for the last 5 years almost with the former superintendent. So I'm not going to sit here and say that the monetary issues are going to go away, because that's not the case. Any more charter expansion is hemorrhaging money. It's taking away direct services that children who come from dire circumstances need. But return to local control does give you a voice that cannot be silenced and vetoed.
Dale Russakoff, your book is a fascinating one. I would say it's troublesome. It's so well written, but it tells a story that ultimately is pretty sad. But one of the lessons, the pedagogical aspect, if you will, is that you articulate that the Zuckerman, Booker, Christie triumvirate didn't anticipate the consequences of not involving the people in the community more fully. But do you believe that if people had been engaged from the beginning, that we'd be any place different than we are now? Certainly the superintendent, I think, would say no, we'd be in the same spot.
Well, I think that, it depends on how you define engagement. Had engagement the way they defined engagement was having 10 community forums to just let people say, randomly what they thought should be done with the schools and what they thought the problems were with the schools. What if you had instead engaged the best teachers in Newark and just, and talked to them about what they need to succeed and what children need to succeed, and build a plan for Newark schools based on the ground level issues in the schools, as opposed to the ideas that somebody coming from outside has for how to reform schools. I think that could have been a really different conversation, and it might have been one that came from the people instead of from this group of outside people and outside money that thought they knew what was best for Newark, and that would have been a very different conversation.
Dale, I wonder, when you looked at your first Oprah, probably the only person in America that was true of, and you saw this $100 million gift being awarded, did you look with the eye of a cynical reporter and say, oh, this is never going to work? Or did you actually think, wow, something wonderful is going to happen in Newark, let me follow it?
Well, it was a little bit in between. I didn't think necessarily that this transformational model of education that could save urban America's schools was going to emerge from this. But I did think with $100 million and the alignment of a governor and a mayor, that, and presumably I thought the mayor had the backing of the city. I later found out that it was not quite that neat.
No.
But thinking of it as a project with that much alignment and that much money, I really did assume that something major would happen and that it would be a very positive story.
Mayor, what did you think when you saw the Zuckerberg gift presented? Did you think, oh, here they go?
I didn't see it. So.
Well, but when you heard, when you read, did you say, here we've got Christie and Booker, both of whom are looking at a very different kind of educational reform than what I want?
I was highly suspicious, to say the least, of what was going to actually happen. You are hopeful that, money infused in the system would somehow benefit or find its way to classrooms and teachers and, all of those things, and we would benefit from that. But ultimately, that's not what took place. I think politics and people's political ideology took place, and they used the money, and really, I think whatever Cammie wanted to do with the money is what they did in the beginning with that. And I thought that was the first mistake.
I'm going to be unfair to you, Mary Bennett, and ask you a yes or no question that's really tough. This sounds like, without change, this is triage, where essentially we're writing off the kids who are in the district schools now in order to make the charter experiment work. Without further change, is that what's going to happen? Because it looks that way.
I can't do a yes or no to that because there are children's lives at stake, so you're never going to get that from me to that question. I believe,
with a minute remaining, Mary.
I believe that we have to find a recovery plan, and we have to find a way to get the resources back so that some of the things lost can be restored for children's needs.
Dale, can that happen?
Well, I think it can, but it's going to take the state being willing to give some money to Newark to try to stabilize the district. And I think that, this is an issue that's not just a Newark issue. In so many cities where charters have expanded aggressively, the district schools are in financial crisis. And so,
Sorry, Mayor, just wanted to get the question in because you've got a half dozen or more charter applications pending right now.
Right.
Are you going to fight them? Can you fight them successfully?
Well, I think it should be a moratorium on them, absolutely. At least 2 or 3 years. I mean, there's no way we could expand charter schools and a district school survive this. It's not going to be able to happen. I mean.
Well, on that sad note, we will meet and talk about this again, but we have to leave it for now, with our thanks to Mayor Baraka, Dale Russakoff, Mary Bennett, and to you for watching.
Equal access to decent education, it's an issue of justice, and justice is what we grapple with each week here on Due Process. Till next week, for Sandy and producer Tanya Bentley, I'm Raymond Brown.
Trying to collaborate on things that we can collaborate on now. And I think ultimately people who are still having this discussion about the fight between district and charter at that level are not seeing what the fundamental problem is. I think, to me, the fundamental problem would always be poverty and inequality. I don't think there is a crisis in American education. I think there's a crisis in neighborhoods where we live. There are charters that outperform public schools like 10 times, and there are public schools that outperform charters. That's just a fact. Like, I didn't make that up, right? So ultimately, if you're still having these debates, then you're having debates about stuff that is not really fundamentally what the problem is. The problem has a lot more to do with how our communities are organized and inequality in America more than anything else. And that's the thing we need to be talking about.
Want even more insight on law and justice? Become a fan of Due Process on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and watch us on demand on YouTube.